All right, everyone, welcome back to the Command Your Brand Show. I'm your host, Josh Silvestro, brand ambassador of Command Your Brands. So in this episode, I actually have a very special guest speaker who actually I love talking to because I always find they're the most energetic and very most fun person I've ever talked to. And this person is actually a mom of 3, which is, I don't know, it always baffles me and it's like amazing, like how they can just run their life and everything like that. She is also a CEO and founder of her own company. So I'd like to introduce you guys to Tiffany. So Tiffany, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I guess explain a little bit about you because I was a little bit like curious more about your business and people who are listening. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you got into the business that you are, and also a little bit about your background.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I worked a 10-year career in corporate food analytics and left that. My husband and I built up a real estate portfolio, had our first kid, and we're like, let's go all in on real estate. So did that. I kind of was part-time stay-at-home mom, part-time real estate investor. We started a podcast, wrote a book in a real estate education space. And I realized after our second son was born that it just wasn't where I wanted to be. It was his business. He loved it. The stay-at-home mom thing, like, bless the women who do that because I'm not cut out for it. And started working as a fractional CFO and absolutely fell in love with it. So I have a heavy finance background. So it just logically made sense and ran the finances in all of our other businesses. So I realized I want to help other businesses reach that next level by really grasping their finances outside of just what goes to the IRS.
Wow. And so what do you think? Because I'm kind of curious. A lot of people seem to have trouble with this. And I found like even people I talk to on the podcast is like, some people have trouble with just the financial aspect of the business, like just what to spend, what not to spend, where should I spend it? All that other things, you know what I mean? Especially when you're starting a business, everyone's like, oh yeah, I got to spend as much as I can just to get going. But then sometimes they make mistakes in like actually going where they should go. And, maybe they make the mistake of that.
Yeah.
What do you find is like the best way to actually work with that? Like when you have a certain amount of funds and like where some people should start with that?
Absolutely. It's so interesting because most people don't go to school and learn finance. And we work a lot in the healthcare space with doctors and dentists. I'm like, they're super intelligent. They know a ton, but they don't know finance. And it's such a gap. And I think it's something I see in the industry is like, it's not something that's talked about. And I think with women entrepreneurs, especially, like there's shame around not knowing how to read a P&L.
Yeah.
And the number of business owners I talk to, and it's, at the end of the year, they just pull their bank statements and send it to their CPA, and that's all they do. And they're not looking at the expenses and thinking strategically. Yeah. So I think it's ideally having that key budget, knowing what your run rate is on the funds you have and how many clients you need to reach your target income, and then adjusting your expenses accordingly to that revenue target. And making sure that when you increase your revenue, that you're actually taking home more and not just throwing it into, I am so guilty of buying coaching programs and online courses and things like that. And they're huge helps, but they suck up all the cash. So it's a fine balance, but it's something I think you have to be very strategic about and not just throw money at the problems and kind of have those guardrails to know how much you really should be spending.
Yeah. I find it interesting too, because like people tend to throw away money when they have it, like especially when they have it, they're like, oh my God, I got to get this. Oh, I got to get that. And it's like, they think, they don't actually look at it sometimes and they just kind of go, oh, let me just grab that because I need it like right now. It's because like, they don't have anything to work with. And so like people just throw away their money just to kind of get something in their hands and just really learn something,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's all money stories that we have from childhood, and the money doesn't grow on trees. And there's so many little nuances in our subconscious brain that we don't notice until you really start to dig into it. And I mean, I see in my life, I have a hesitancy to spend sometimes because of how my parents spent. Right. And they amassed a huge wealth, but now they're in their 60s and are, hesitant to go buy a $5,000 whatever, even though it's like a negligible percentage of their net worth.
Yeah. I think it's for when they're older like that too. Like my grandparents were like that and they're from Italy and they came across, they're like, oh my God, like we're so wealthy here, but like, we don't want to spend any money. It's kind of like the most fun. It's like the weirdest thing. Like, my grandparents, like my grandfather was in, the Navy, and he also fixed trains. He used to when he was alive, and it was funny. It's just like he never spent any of it. It was just like all like, oh, we got to save it, we got to save it for like whatever reason. It's like, which I find it's not necessarily the worst thing, but it's also like you need to spend money on things that you need.
Absolutely. It's such a fine balance. And I think you have to know what your money stories are and really try to dig into it to see what the pattern is in your life. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, like, for my husband and I, we have been great at amassing net worth, but cash flow has been a struggle for us. So we're trying to shift that and stop building for future and start enjoying for today. So it's just such a fine balance, but I love digging into it and helping people uncover their money stories so that they can not, blow the money as soon as it comes into the account.
Right. What do you think? Because I know you mentioned this earlier. I think it was either on the podcast or before. You mentioned the mindset of like what people should be spending and like how they should be spending. What do you find is the easiest mindset people should be in when either thinking about spending something or saving it? Like what are the deciding factors, I guess?
Yeah, I think having clarity on the reality of the situation is kind of the first step, and then setting the guardrails, really. Our subconscious brain takes over and we get in that like reptilian mode of doing things that we've been programmed from a young age. And I think if you can make decisions from a healthy place and know that you're not going to go online shop at 2 a.m. I mean, as a mom with young kids, like when you're up in the middle of the night nursing a baby, it is hard not to go onto Amazon and buy stupid stuff that you don't need because you're so sleep deprived and, it's something to do. So it's having those guardrails from a logical place and then sticking to them. That's where the fun part comes in. But it's the analysis and knowing where your money is going and how much you have to spend. And with our fractional CFO clients, we'll build out a cash flow forecast and say, hey, if you want to hire this new employee or buy this program or this piece of equipment, here's what that does to your cash situation. Right. Because if you run out of cash, you can't function. So
it's interesting because like I know a lot of people that they spend countless dollars on just like little things, and it's like it kind of adds up to a point where like, wow, this is almost overwhelming, but you kind of need those things. So I guess for like people who are like mompreneurs, I guess is what we call them, or like women entrepreneurs, like what helps with actually organizing those things? Because like you're right, like I'm sure a lot of moms are just kind of like gee, I need something to do, I need to go to Amazon, I need to buy this, I need to get this, I need to do that. Like how is there a controlling way to kind of like control that, or just to actually maintain that in terms of spending or like not spending or anything like that?
I think it all comes down to having a pulse on the spending. Personally, we use Rocket Money and love it because it'll tell you your subscriptions, it'll tell you how much you're spending, and it summarizes it in a very easy way. On the business side, having a bookkeeper, we use QuickBooks in our businesses, and going once a quarter and pulling a transaction list or having your bookkeeper pull it and see where is the money actually going, and targeting those higher ticket expenses. I mean, the small stuff does add up, but if you're spending thousands of dollars a month on something, you need to make sure it's going somewhere very intentional.
Wow. It just seems so intense. Like I can just see it, how there's just so much at stake and just also so much to do in terms of getting things organized. And like, I think that's also good too with having a bookkeeping. And, I've also used Rocket Money too. Rocket Money is really good for like organizational and, bank statements and like what you're spending, where your subscriptions are, where you're not spending, so I think it's really, really helpful with those. Are there any other tools that you would say are very workable in terms of understanding or just organizing financially where things can be for a business?
I mean, I'm a spreadsheet junkie. I like to take all the numbers and analyze them, but my team's actually working to build out a program to help smaller business owners who can't necessarily afford a fractional CFO. So this would be a tool that's all encompassing, where you can dump your P&L and your transactions and analyze them faster than you would on your own. So, I mean, I'm sure there's software out there. I know QuickBooks has some charts and things you can use. I personally hate QuickBooks. I think it's not intuitive and it's really difficult to use. And I'm a finance person, so like, it's pretty bad. But I think it's just
Your final review. Just kidding.
Yes. I think just having a plan to review it.
Yeah.
Because if you're not looking at all of your KPIs, if you're spending money on marketing, but you're not getting the return on it, you need to pivot to a different marketing channel.
Right.
So it's just having an eye on the numbers in your business, whether they're financial or other metrics. And you can brute force it with a spreadsheet, but also there are people like me out there who love doing this, and you can outsource it and have some help that way.
Yeah. It's so funny too. Like I know a lot of people, especially in like different businesses, especially like women entrepreneurs that just like, I always find that, I forget who told this to me. Someone once told me that there are people such as there's buyers and there's savers, and there's two different people. And like some people, I'm not saying all women are like this, but like there's a lot of women out there that are buyers more than savers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because it's flipped in my house. Really? I am 100% the saver. And my husband's like, oh, this looks cool. Let's buy it. I'm the let it sit in the Amazon cart for 2 weeks and then maybe I'll think about buying it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is definitely a stereotype that women spend more money. And I think some of it is there's something about going into Target and getting a Starbucks and just walking around with or without your kids because it entertains them a little bit. And you can just kind of get a moment to breathe.
Yeah.
And Target has those like mega bus buggies that you can throw the kids in, and they just self-entertain. So like the whole stigma around women in Target, I think it's just a minute to breathe.
Yeah.
And as far as like within business, I think it comes back to just the insecurity around knowing finance and trying to throw money at the problem instead of being really strategic.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's just a woman attribute, but
yeah, of course.
If you don't have a good grasp on how much is coming in and how much is going out, it's really hard to make those informed decisions.
Yeah. I find it interesting too. One of the things I've talked to a lot of doctors, CEOs, founders, right, is one of their biggest things is that they are trying to maintain their business as a CEO and founder, but they have kids and they have grandkids or they have families that they're trying to also be around. So they're trying to create this work balance life of like, how do I be with 3 kids and also and a husband, and how do I balance my actual business in terms of that? Like, what do you obviously you have a third one on the way and 2 little ones. I'm sure. I have a feeling it's boys. You have boys.
2 boys, hopefully a girl, because it'll be 3 boys under 5 plus my husband, who's basically a big kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're hoping for a girl this time.
Yeah. So like, what do you find is the secret? I know, because a lot of people I've asked this, like, what do you find is the secret balance to like actually working and being with your family?
Yeah. I think part of it is when I'm working, I am very intentional in what I'm doing. And I use the Eisenhower matrix, which is a time delegation methodology.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot. I have my team helps me a ton. So I have found ways to make it easier to get things done. Honestly, going offline helps a lot. So for example, like if I'm working a PowerPoint, I'll put it on my tablet, my Remarkable tablet that has just the PowerPoint, nothing else. And I'll make my notes on there and send it to my admin. So I'm not the one building out the slides, because if I was doing that, there's no way I'd have the time.
Yeah, so I always find it so hard to like just balance even just 2 kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and my kids are out of school at 3 most days, and my husband and I'll trade off on who goes and gets them, but we take that time to go out in nature as a family, and we're really intentional about the time we spend with them. So it's really, when I'm at work, I'm at work. When I'm doing self-care, I'm doing self-care, and I'm not, I might think about work, but I'm focused on that downtime. And then when I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. Yeah. So I think it's being just very intentional and being 100% where my feet are. And obviously, we get incident reports probably 2 or 3 a week on our kids from school if someone got bit or someone got stung by a bee. And it's a comedic break in the middle of the workday, but we're not going to go pick them up for it.
Right.
Obviously, if they're really hurt, we would, but just trying to be where our feet are is the big thing.
Yeah, I think that's super important too, because I always heard too that like when you have a happy family who is thriving, your work seems to go better. I don't know if you've had that share experience, but like I noticed that when your family life is doing well, then you kind of your work life either starts to go better or actually does go better, in some shape or form,
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's two other big things we do. We outsource as much as we can around the house.
Right.
We don't cut our grass anymore. We have a company that comes and picks up laundry because folding little boy clothes takes forever. And you can't fold it with the kids around because they'll go knock over the pile of laundry. So we outsource that. And I mean, anything that we can outsource that is lower dollar per hour than what we could make in the business, we outsource.
Yeah, actually, I've heard that somewhere where like the amount of, you look at how many hours is spent and how much it makes, how much you do those things, how much it actually costs to make it rather than paying somebody else. So it's kind of an interesting point. I really like that point you mentioned about that.
Absolutely. The other big thing we do is my husband and I have every Thursday night is date night.
Nice.
And there are very few times that we miss it, but it just gives us space to be adults and not have to put the kids to bed because that's always chaos. And it's just a break that makes we can go into the weekend much more put together and ready for the chaos of 24/7 with the kids. And I think it gives us the foundation of we're a team. And because we do work together and co-parent and, run the house, it's a lot. So having that space to just be a couple really helps.
And it also helps too, because it's kind of interesting. He's also a CEO and founder as well of his own company, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we started the On Purpose Investor. I don't know what year. I need to get my years down. It's all just a blur. We bought our first house together for a rental property before we were, I think even before we were engaged. Like we kind of knew we were going to get together. So it's just been chaos since we met. But his business is the On Purpose Investor, and he helps real estate investors get to that next level, or anyone who's interested in real estate. And it's a lot of mindset and goal setting and all the juicy stuff. So it's not the sexy, go buy on subject to or any of the fun real estate strategies. It's really the core meat of how to find success and financial freedom and happiness in your life.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting too, because you guys also are CEOs and founders, it actually seems like it's easier because you have your own businesses and you guys kind of work together in terms of getting yourselves out there more, or more of a team. And I really feel that's so important, especially as a family or as a husband or as a wife. Like you have this team that you have because they're the most trusted person that's in your life right now. So I find it so important. That's me and my fiance. We work in podcasting and, we're going to start our own business, but it's interesting what you mentioned about actually having to work together in a lot of different areas. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a designated time every week where we sit down and do a personal family finance review, talk about the businesses.
Yeah.
Because we found we were having conversations about business all the time. And now as our son's 4, he's talking all the time and doesn't stop. So it's not like we can have those conversations in the evening.
Yeah.
So having designated time to review all the business stuff together has been critical.
Yeah. What do you find because obviously as your husband is a CEO, you're a CEO. How do you actually balance that? Some people have their 2 businesses, one is run by another person. You run your own. It's kind of and sometimes, I don't know if you ever had this where they kind of get intermingled with each other. How does that sometimes, how do you make it not happen, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely, he is more tech savvy. So I'm in his podcast studio. We built some AI videos. So he did that for me. And I'll help him. If he's building out a presentation, I'll help with the strategy on it. So we have a good ebb and flow, but it's all in calendar blocking. I mean, I think all of our success comes down to structure and having clear plans and expectations and setting that time on the calendar of hey, I need you at this time, and holding firm to that time block and not letting it run over, and just being respectful of each other's time, and the trade-off with the kids of making sure not either one of us is overburdened with the family responsibilities.
Yeah, it's so cool. I actually appreciate people more when they're CEOs and founders, but they also have 2 or 3 kids, especially you who have almost a third. You have 2.5, I would say. And you run your own show, you run your own business, you run your you help your husband with his business, and you help with kids. It's just like you guys don't waste time.
Well, and it's really funny because he was in the National Guard up until recently. Wow. So there were also stints of 3 to 6 month deployments mixed in there too.
Oh my God.
It's been nuts. So honestly, with him now no longer in the military, we're in a slower pace than we've ever been. So
It must have made you stronger too, because especially him, who's very dedicated to something and gets things done, he probably knows a thing or two about that. So
absolutely,
that's pretty good. Yeah. And I guess like for you, because I kind of want to get to know more about your business. So can you give us like a little bit, like a taste of like what your business consists of?
Yeah, absolutely. So a fractional CFO firm it's a CFO in a scaled back level. So what that typically looks like is a monthly call with our clients to review their financials, set strategy. We're not implementing, but we're focused on helping them find the right strategy financially. So should they hire? Should they buy the equipment? Should they expand locations? Things like that. I mean, I think there's so much confusion on what is a CFO versus an accountant. And it really, the way I like to look at it is accounting is looking at the past and building your tax strategy and what you need for the IRS. And then your bookkeeper is doing that transactional level classification of the transactions in your business.
Yeah.
The CFO is helping with that forward-looking strategy on where you want to go.
Yeah.
And we do a lot with goal setting. Which lines up perfectly with my husband's business because we built out a whole program around goal setting.
Yeah.
So we help businesses really figure out where they want to go financially. And that's personally too. I mean, how much do you want to take home for your family?
Right.
And then we
especially when you have 3 kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not fun working a business that doesn't make any money.
Yes.
And you're, paying your team and staff and everything, and you're not making anything. So we help businesses find kind of that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And in building this business, like a fractional CFO is under $100,000 a year, which is a lot cheaper than a full-time CFO, which would be probably $300,000 after you pay benefits and everything else. So I
just have a question. What is a fractional and a regular CFO? Like, what's the difference?
So a full-time CFO would be someone for obviously much larger businesses.
Yeah.
They are on the C-suite.
Yeah.
The fractional CFO it's like a contract CFO. So we're working on a part-time basis. But for most medium-sized businesses, it gets you what you need. You don't need someone in the office every day. You just need someone helping set that strategic direction for you.
Yeah. I guess like since you've encountered a lot of businesses and you actually helped a lot of people, what are some like common mistakes people do in their business, which I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of?
Yeah.
Like what are some common mistakes people do in that area?
I think the biggest thing I see is not having a very, very clear strategy on what they need to bring in.
Yeah.
So for example, I had a client and they became good friends of mine at the end of the day, but they were in real estate and they had a plan to flip houses and to buy for rentals. And they wound up buying so many and keeping them that they weren't bringing in the current cash flow that you get from flipping.
Yeah.
And they were cash strapped because they had so much overhead with their team, but they weren't bringing in the $40,000, $50,000 checks that they needed. They were bringing in the, $200 a month from a rental.
Mm-hmm.
And it fit their vision to build up the rental portfolio, but they weren't they wanted to go buy some camping equipment for a couple $100 and couldn't afford it with their 4 kids. And we realized they have to flip at least one house a month to cover the overhead and bring in the cash they need for their family. And with that clarity, they ramped up their marketing. They wound up flipping 2 or 3 houses a month and then continued keeping a bunch of rentals. And all of a sudden, their cash situation improved significantly. They no longer have to scrap for, camping equipment for their kids and get to really live their dream life now while they're continuing to build for their future.
Wow. That sounds like really interesting because I'm like, especially house flipping, I'm sure that's really difficult because you buy and then you have to sell it. It's like, especially I look at, because I'm also tech savvy too. So like when I see a good deal on a phone and like it's like brand new, I'm like, dude, I gotta get that. And even just selling those can sometimes be difficult because people are like, oh, I want the new thing. So I can understand that view. Like I'll give an example. Like I bought these like years ago. I think someone gave it to me as a gift. Actually, I bought someone gave me the AirPods Maxes, if you know if I'm talking about, and they're like $550, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so good, but no one wants them because they're so expensive. You know what I mean? So then after a while, now the new ones came out. They're like, oh, let's sell them again. Like people are like, nope, I don't want that. Yeah. So that's really interesting what you mentioned about just, I think there's a key thing here, and I think you probably can go off on this. There's got to be some things that people need to in terms of set like a baseline, like before, like when they are buying something or they're starting to buy things, what they should look for. I guess, would you I'm sure you probably have some things that would help people in terms of when they buy things or when they should buy things, like when they should look at stuff, especially new people. What do you think people should buy or look at before buying?
I mean, it's really knowing what kind of the cash position of your business.
Yeah.
And can you afford it? I mean, if you know you have a big influx of cash coming in, it's making sure that you know where it's going, because I've seen, like, in our personal life, we live in this feast or famine because we have these the rental properties. We'll refi one and we'll put everything into fixing it up and then refinance and get all the cash that we put in back and then some. And we make sure we know exactly when we get that big check where every penny is going. And some of it just goes to, we'll have like a, slush fund to go do something fun, but we make sure that we're very intentional with where the money's going. Mm-hmm. So I think it all comes back to having a plan and some structure around your finances.
Yeah. I know you mentioned earlier before that you were like a spreadsheet nerd, like you just love like writing spreadsheets out. Like, is there like, I don't know if you've ever seen this, like sometimes like on Etsy or like some other places, they sell like these spreadsheets of like, oh, like this is what you should do. Like, this is how I should set it up. Is there like a really good one that you have or that you made that is like people can actually get or like actually put together? Because some people that I've talked to who are like new businesses, they're like, oh, I don't have one of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're working to develop something for smaller business owners right now. And it would be a course on all the business fundamentals. We'll get into some of that money mindset stuff and the stories, how to read the financial statements, because it's not something that's common knowledge. And then giving the dashboard and the spreadsheet so you can do it yourself. And it'll be set up in a way where you can export from your bookkeeping tool or just pull a bank statement in. So it's kind of for any level of business that's kind of starting out and doesn't want the one-on-one support. And then we also are about to launch a kind of mid-tier price point for the business owners that aren't quite ready for the 6-figure investment.
Right.
And it's a monthly call or a monthly video where we'll send you just a summary of what we see in your finances. And then once a quarter, we'll set a strategic direction. So it's not as costly as a full fractional CFO, but you still get the support for that kind of mid-level business that's not quite ready for that full investment, but needs a little bit more support than just a spreadsheet. That's
fascinating. Because like I definitely know people that would definitely benefit from just a spreadsheet or just like putting things together. Because I know, when you start, at least I'm sure you've had this experience with some people, they just start a business, they're like all excited. They're like, oh, we got to do all these things. And then they kind of forget the little things that they have to do in terms of financial stuff. And I think that would be a really good tool for people to know and actually have, because some people just don't know, actually how to do it. And I think that's a really fascinating thing, especially for me, because I love math and I love putting things like in numbers in like a spreadsheet of some kind. Because I know when me and my fiance do like a financial plan of like what our month is going to look like, it's kind of like I have it all written down exactly what's going to be paid for, what needs to be paid, when it's coming, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was such a math nerd. I remember in probably late elementary school taking the barcode off of library books and doing long division with it just for fun. So
that's funny.
Like, I love spreadsheets. I love math.
Yeah.
But I know not everyone does.
Yeah.
And I realized that was my superpower. And we found our financial freedom through real estate in 4 years. But it was because we manipulated the numbers and bought houses a certain way. And just, it was my math skills at the end of the day and spreadsheet skills that got us there.
The skills what pay the bills, I think they say, right?
Absolutely. And I love it. And I honestly got to the point where it's like I missed building our real estate portfolio because I wasn't doing that as much anymore. And that's when I was like, why not just go do this for other businesses?
Yeah, totally.
So that's how Insight became a business.
That's great. So I guess like my last thing I would love to talk about, because I know you've obviously had clients that have come to you and they asked for help and you delivered some help. Can you give me one story? I would love to hear like a story from you of like you've helped someone do something in your business, because I'm very interested in what other people say about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a client she was using credit cards to pay credit cards.
Wow.
She had just gotten in such a hole, and she was also in real estate. And she had paid cash for a house. So that's where all of her cash was. So it's not like she was spending in a very unique way, but she had the cash available if she offloaded that house. And we were able to just kind of lay out the bills and come up with a strategy so she could tackle them. And just get out of the hole. So, I mean, I've worked with clients that are huge businesses that have it all together, and we're just setting strategy on expanding to other locations and things like that. But I really have a heart for the businesses that are just trying to figure out how to get it to the next week sometimes. And it's a struggle, but it's so fulfilling for myself to help someone get the clarity of how do I get out of this hole and reach that level of success.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because clarity I find is key, because people who want a business, I think they're always scared because they don't have that clarity of their business, of where it's going to go, what's going to look like, because no one really knows, but you can only plan for what you can do for future. And that's the outcome you can try to create, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've worked with people where the clarity becomes the business is no longer a fit and they look to sell or shut it down. And it's hard conversations that we have. Yeah. And sometimes it's, get out of your own way. I mean, it can be very tough to have some of these conversations, but it's so fulfilling when we can help someone live their life that they've been working towards just by moving a few things in a spreadsheet and finding that freedom.
They just need to buy a spreadsheet from you and then they're good.
Yeah. I wish.
Clarity sheets.
Yes.
That's great. Well, awesome. Thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate you answering a lot of questions and getting to know more about you, and for my audience to kind of know about you. And I really appreciate all the things the time that you've given us, especially as a busy lady like you with 2.5 kids and a kid husband. And he's also CEO and founder. So, and you're CEO and founder of your own business. So it's like, I got a cool 30-minute conversation with you. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And of course, I think everyone here who's listening to this, thanks for listening to the show. And of course, if you like this stuff, please like and subscribe to this. And of course, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And thank you so much, Tiffany, for joining the show.
Thank you.